An evil father threw him into a polluted river to die, never imagining his son would survive and find this. The man had recently lost his wife. With a disturbingly calm demeanor, he went through the motions of planning her funeral. Every detail was handled with precision. The flowers were exactly as she would have liked, the casket matched her style, and the service proceeded seamlessly. Friends and close family attending couldn't help but notice his lack of sorrow. There were no tears, no visible grief. In fact, he seemed almost at ease, as if the loss marked the end of something he'd been carrying for far too long. As the crowd paid their respects, her young son, Liam, clung tightly to the grave. His heartbroken sobs pierced through the murmurs of prayers and quiet conversations. "Mummy, please wake up," he cried again and again, his small hands clawing at the damp earth as if he could somehow pull her back. A family friend, deeply moved, tried to approach to comfort him, but before she could say a word, his father stepped in, his face still devoid of emotion. "Liam, that's enough," he said, in a low but firm voice, reaching down to pull him up. With tear-streaked cheeks, Liam looked up at his father, desperate for an answer, his innocent pain so raw that some mourners had to turn away. The man, still without a hint of tenderness, lifted his son. He offered no words of comfort, no, "I understand," or "It'll be okay." He strapped Liam into the car, driving him away from the cemetery. Liam's cries softened, though he continued to whisper, "Mummy, please," his voice barely audible as he gazed out the window, hoping to see her once more. But his father remained silent, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, unmoved by his son's grief. A few days later, the man arrived at his late wife's attorney's office. The air was thick with tension. Sitting down, he crossed his legs and tapped his fingers on the arm of the chair, waiting. The man's expression was calm, but his eyes gave away a flicker of greed mixed with unease as the lawyer organized the paperwork. "All right, sir," the lawyer said, clearing his throat and adjusting his glasses. "Let's begin with the reading of the will." With a slight nod, the man leaned forward, eager to catch every word, already imagining the wealth soon to be his. The house, the bank accounts, the properties, all of it was rightfully his after all. He was her husband. The lawyer started to read in a steady, composed tone. The initial paragraphs covered formalities, minor bequests, and charitable contributions. The man grew more impatient, his foot tapping anxiously as he waited to hear the part he was certain would confirm his good fortune. "I declare that all my properties, bank accounts, and assets shall be transferred to my son Liam," the lawyer read, pausing briefly to gauge the man's reaction. Time seemed to freeze. An icy silence filled the room. The man's eyes widened in disbelief, and his face twisted into a barely contained fury. "What?" he whispered, the words slowly escalating into an outraged shout. "How can all of it go to Liam?" The lawyer, unfazed, continued reading. "The boy's father will have access to the assets only if he provides for Liam's well-being and proper upbringing," he added, finally looking up, his eyes meeting the man's. The man's scoff was loud enough to echo. He jumped to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. "What about me?" he shouted, slamming his fist on the table, his voice quivering with rage, veins straining visibly on his neck and forehead, his skin flushing. The lawyer remained unruffled. He had witnessed this response countless times before. "As I said, sir," he replied calmly, "you may use the funds solely for the benefit of your son, should you fulfill the conditions set in the will." His voice was firm, unwavering, otherwise a guardian that the late Mrs. appointed will be in charge of managing the assets. The man felt as if the lawyer's words had landed a punch in his stomach, his mouth twisted into a look of raw resentment, his face flushing with anger. An overwhelming sense of helplessness gripped him. He had planned on inheriting everything, yet now This young boy held more control over his future than he had ever imagined. "This can't be happening," he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his frustration. He took a step backward, as if the very room offended his pride. The lawyer remained composed, reaching into his suit jacket to retrieve a business card. He held it out, but the man barely glanced at it. "Call me if you need any advice or additional information on next steps," the lawyer said, in a steady, neutral tone. The man grabbed the card, immediately crumpling it in his hand with a sharp motion. Without another word, he stormed out, letting the door slam behind him. The noise echoed through the hallways of the building. The lawyer exhaled quietly, adjusting his glasses again. He had witnessed plenty of emotional reactions over the years, but few as raw as this. He closed the file on his desk, a fleeting thought crossing his mind. Poor Liam. I only hope someone actually steps up to look after him. Later that night, the man sat alone in his dark living room, the ticking of the wall clock the only sound slicing through the silence. Each tick seemed to stir the anger simmering inside him. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and downed it in one gulp, barely feeling the burn as it slid down his throat. The lawyer's blank expression during the reading kept replaying in his mind, making his rage boil over with each passing second. His knuckles turned white as he clenched the empty glass, and he pulled the crumpled business card from his pocket. He looked at the number, hesitated, then dialed with fingers that trembled in a mix of agitation and determination. He knew what he wanted, and he was going to do whatever it took to get it. After a few rings, the lawyer's voice came through, calm and businesslike. "Good evening," he said, sounding distant and detached. The man skipped the pleasantries, his voice thick with restrained fury, every word dripping with venom. "Listen closely, lawyer. Is there any way I can claim all of that inheritance? Every last cent, no strings attached," he demanded, his tone growing darker with each word. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The lawyer seemed to be choosing his words with precision. When he finally replied, his tone was icy and controlled, each word hitting like a dagger through the tension. "Yes," he said, chillingly calm. "There is one way, but your son would have to disappear." For a moment, the man was left speechless. His grip tightened on the phone, and a heavy silence blanketed the conversation. The lawyer's words had come out with such a chilling calm, devoid of hesitation or remorse. They were precise, cold, and weighted with a sinister undertone. He stammered, swallowing hard, his eyes widening as an icy dread crept down his spine. He knew the lawyer wasn't suggesting something as simple as sending the boy away. This was permanent. The lawyer didn't waver. "That's right. As long as your son lives, the inheritance will remain his," the lawyer continued, each word deliberate. "But if he were no longer around, the entire fortune could be yours." The words hung in the air, thickening the dim room with a near-palpable tension. The man stared off into the distance, saying nothing. His anger was like a storm brewing in his chest, laced now with a sliver of fear, but his hunger for what he saw as his rightful claim hadn't lessened. "That's all I can say," the lawyer added, with a tone that was chillingly indifferent before ending the call. "If you need anything else, you have my number." The call clicked off, leaving the man alone with his thoughts. Still clutching the phone, he gazed at the screen as his mind spiraled further into the dark, inching away from any sense of reason. His hand grazed the empty whiskey glass on the table, making it tremble as he set the phone down. His shadow stretched, long and ominous, across the wall, and one word echoed in his mind: "Disappear," spoken with that lawyer's unfeeling detachment. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the trees and causing the old house to groan. Inside, shrouded in the night stillness, The man's face hardened. Not long after, he began to transform the house into something unrecognizable. Strange women started appearing. Loud music echoed through the halls, filling every corner, with parties that raged until dawn. The warm, peaceful home had morphed into a place of chaos and recklessness, leaving no space for Liam's innocence. From the shadows, the boy watched, his frightened eyes wide, as he took in the strangers filling the rooms where he once played with his mother. He retreated to his room, pressing his hands over his ears, desperate to block out the blaring music and unfamiliar voices that grew louder, sometimes even hostile. Nights that were once filled with stories and lullabies had turned into a nightmare of noise and shouting. Among the many women who passed through his life, one stayed longer than the rest. She had bright blonde hair and a sharp, unsettling glint in her eyes that sent a chill down Liam's spine whenever they crossed paths. Her voice, which was always soft and sugary when she spoke to the man, turned ice-cold and biting when she addressed Liam. "What are you doing standing there? Get to your room!" She'd hiss, pointing at him dismissively, as if he were a mere inconvenience to be brushed away. Liam would comply silently, head down, retreating to his small, safe space. He understood his father would never stand up for him. His father's indifference was so complete, it was as if Liam didn't exist. But his father's apathy went beyond just ignoring him. There was something else lurking there, a shadow of darkness Liam couldn't comprehend, but that filled him with a raw fear. Late one night, after a long party, the woman stayed close to the man. They waited patiently until the house was quiet, all guests gone, and the silence thickened around them. She edged closer, slipping her arm around his shoulder, her smile twisted. "Don't you think it's time to get rid of that kid?" she murmured, a near sinister gleam in her eyes. The man, weary and glassy from too many drinks, looked at her. Her smile grew wider, and she leaned in so that only he could hear her. "Make him disappear. That little pest is the only thing standing in the way of the life we deserve, together. Imagine how much simpler everything would be without him around. No one will thank you for keeping him here," she continued, her voice honeyed with a deceptive kindness. "But deep down, we both know what needs to happen." The man stayed silent, his gaze drifting toward the closed door of Liam's room, where a faint sliver of light seeped from beneath. For a brief moment, he seemed to hesitate, but her words echoed the darkest thoughts that had crept into his mind since he had read the will. She touched his cheek lightly, her smile growing with each second. "Just think about it, darling. No more worries. It'd be just you, me, and the life we deserve," she cooed, her tone smooth and persuasive, as if she were offering him everything he had ever wanted. The man closed his eyes, letting the shadows deepen around him. Her words lingered in his thoughts, and the idea of a life free from responsibilities felt like the only solution. Before dawn, the man stormed into Liam's room. Without speaking, he yanked the covers off and shook Liam's shoulder roughly. Liam's eyes fluttered open as he stared up at his father's menacing shadow in the doorway, which the light in the hallway had only dimly illuminated. The cold night air clung to him, bringing with it an unease that tightened around his chest. "Get up," his father muttered, voice low and strained with barely controlled frustration. Liam's eyes fluttered open, disoriented, trying to grasp what was happening. There was no hint of warmth in his father's movements, just a sense of urgency that hinted at something darker. Without fully processing it, Liam followed, allowing himself to be pulled toward the door. He managed to slide his feet into his sneakers, their thin soles meeting the chill of the floor as he was hurried along. "Dad, where are we going?" he asked, his voice small and shaky, but his father stayed silent as he guided him to the car. The man opened the back door and pushed Liam inside, slamming it shut with a rough finality. Curling up in the seat, unbuckled, Liam's hands trembled as he glanced at his father's stiff, silent profile behind the wheel. A shiver went down his spine, and his breath hitched in his throat. Something felt horribly wrong. The car crept down the deserted road, the headlights cutting only a small swath of visibility through the dim, desolate landscape. Liam gazed out the window, watching as the shadows of trees towered over the roadside, dark and imposing. The silence around them was stifling, heavier than the cold morning air, filling the space with a sense of impending dread. After what felt like hours, the car stopped. They had come to a dense forest, the faintly lit outlines of a polluted river winding through the rocks, hidden beneath the faint moonlight. His father killed the engine, leaving the murmur of the moving water as the only sound. He climbed out and opened the back door, where Liam sat frozen. "Dad!" Liam's voice cracked, tinged with fear, but his father didn't respond. Instead, he seized him firmly, lifting him off the seat. Liam's eyes filled with tears, and realization washed over him, sharp and terrifying. As terror took hold, Liam began to cry, his hands gripping his father's jacket tightly. "Dad, please don't. I love you," he pleaded, his words shaking with desperation. "Don't do this to me," he sobbed, his voice trembling with dread. But his father remained unmoved, his face devoid of emotion, his gaze empty. There was no softness, no hesitation. Coldly, he pried Liam's fingers loose, and in a swift, unforgiving motion, flung him toward the river. The frigid, murky water eventually swallowed Liam's screams after they filled the forest. The boy struggled, arms flailing and legs kicking desperately, fighting to stay above the icy water as it pulled him under. He gasped, swallowing water, his terrified eyes barely catching a glimpse of his father heading back to the car. The car's red brake lights flashed briefly before it drove away, disappearing down the road without even a backward glance. With freezing water filling his lungs and numbing his body, Liam's mind clung to a single question, lingering as the river's current tugged him along. His strength was fading, and his last image was his father walking away. What the man didn't know, though, was that Liam's mother had taught him something crucial from a young age. She used to say, "Liam, knowing how to swim could save your life one day. Don't ever forget that." Her words had stuck with him, echoing in his head as he felt the crushing cold and fear. Trapped in the murky, icy river, Liam pushed through the terror, moving his arms and legs, trying desperately to keep his head above the water. He couldn't see far in the filthy, swirling current, but he swam with everything he had toward the bank. Every movement felt like lifting weights as his muscles screamed in pain, while the river's force seemed determined to drag him back. But he refused to quit. He had to survive. After what felt like an endless battle, he finally reached the muddy riverbank, gasping for air and shivering uncontrollably, his body coated in grime and debris. His hands and feet were numb, but he knew he had to get away from the water. He stumbled over to a bush nearby, curling up under it to conserve what little warmth remained. Hugging his trembling body, he squeezed his eyes shut, enduring the biting cold and the fear that his father might come back. Yet, despite the agony, Liam held on. As dawn lit the horizon, he opened his eyes, his skin chilled and coated in dried mud. He heard faint voices and slowly rose, staggering toward the sound. People from the nearby houses were emerging, and as they noticed him, their faces turned to shock and disgust. "Oh, that's terrible," a woman muttered as she passed by, nose wrinkling at the sight. Liam, covered in filth, his clothes torn and hair soaked, was more than just dirty. Liam was desperate with hunger. Approaching a house, he knocked hesitantly, his hands shaking. When a woman answered, he looked up at her with pleading eyes. "Ma'am, could you spare something to eat?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper, weakened by hunger. But the woman just gave him a cold look, before slamming the door shut. Liam stood there, Staring at the closed door, his stomach twisting in hunger, he moved on, trying door after door, hoping someone might show him a little kindness. But each time, he faced the same response. Looks of disgust and harsh words like, "Get out of here. I don't want a filthy beggar on my porch." One man even shouted from his window, tossing a bucket of water at him to drive him off. Liam took a step back, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall, then wiped his face with the back of his hand. Not a single person was willing to help, not even a crust of bread. In desperation, he noticed a lemon tree in one of the nearby yards. Without much thought, he climbed up, his hands slipping against the wet bark until he reached a branch filled with lemons. Grabbing one, he bit into it. The sour juice stung his mouth, tears springing to his eyes, but the emptiness in his stomach eased a little. The tartness made his lips crack, and he shivered from the acidic bite. But he had no other choice. He sat in the tree, gazing down at the houses of those who had turned him away, as people walked by without even glancing in his direction, like he was invisible. Alone, truly alone, Liam understood that if he wanted to survive, he'd have to rely on himself. In the following days, Liam started exploring the area more, gradually moving into the nearby woods, searching for anything that could keep him going. To his relief, he stumbled upon wild fruit trees hidden deeper in the forest. Apple trees, orange trees, and pear trees growing freely, offering the sustenance he so badly needed. Even though his hands still shook from weakness, he gathered as much as he could, enough to fill his aching stomach. As he ate, his eyes wandered to a nearby river. Its murky, polluted waters reminded him of the day his own father had cast him aside, leaving him to fend for himself. He walked up to the river's edge, staring down at his reflection, a face smeared with dirt, eyes weary, but with a faint spark of purpose. An idea struck him right then. He'd revive the river. Somehow, he felt that by breathing life back into this river, he might mend something broken deep inside himself, a piece left scarred by betrayal and loneliness. Without hesitation, Liam rolled up his sleeves and stepped into the icy water. The chill bit into his skin, but it didn't feel like fear this time. Determined, he began pulling out the trash, bottles, bags, plastic, and other junk littering the surface. His small hands moved relentlessly, dragging debris to the shore, piling it up bit by bit. Before long, people in town noticed him wading in the river. It didn't take much for their disgust to turn into loud jeers. "Oh, what's he doing in there?" one woman hollered from afar, arms crossed, watching Liam struggle with an old car tire. "Get out, kid. Can't you see you're just stirring up all that nastiness?" another man called out, laughing as others joined in. But Liam ignored them. Day in, day out, at dawn's first light, he returned to the river. Cold mornings, hunger, and exhaustion didn't deter him as he plunged back in. The ridicule, the sneers, the dismissive looks, they meant nothing to him. His mother had taught him to do the right thing, no matter what others said, and he intended to keep that lesson close to his heart. Bag by bag, bottle by bottle, Liam cleaned the river, his commitment far beyond his years. The pile of trash on shore grew, and though no one lent a hand, he felt a quiet, fulfilling satisfaction that urged him to keep going. Every piece of litter he removed felt like healing a wound in the river, and somehow, in himself. Meanwhile, miles away, his father had moved on with a whole new life. After reporting Liam missing, he'd ensured no one would dig too deep. The case was quietly closed, and with no delay, he accessed his inheritance. It wasn't long before he was splurging on luxury cars, glittering jewelry, and hosting extravagant parties in what had once been their family home. His days were filled with laughter, music, and the thrill of watching money disappear, each dollar spent drowning out the memory of his son. Bit by bit, neon lights and fancy drinks erased any remaining trace. He blew through every cent of his inheritance on superficial thrills, desperately trying to fill an emptiness that money couldn't touch. While his father dove deeper into indulgence, Liam, barefoot, hands coated in mud, was working tirelessly to bring life back to the river. Each piece of trash Liam dragged from the water wasn't just garbage. It was a symbol of hope, a chance for a new beginning. He was carving out for himself. With every bit of muck and every splash, he was reclaiming his dignity, piecing together a life that he could be proud of. As his father sank deeper into selfish excess, Liam was rising up from rock bottom, from a forgotten, polluted river that nobody else cared about. After countless, exhausting days, he finally cleared all the visible junk from the water. Piles of bottles, bags, and debris littered the shore, standing as a testament to his hard work. But even with his relentless effort, the river's water stayed black and unmoving. The foul smell hung in the air, a bitter reminder that his mission was far from complete. Townspeople continued to cast judgmental glances and muttered words, despite being amazed by his resolve. "He's lost it," some sneered. "This is pointless," others murmured. But none of that mattered to Liam. He sensed there was something more, something hidden he needed to find to revive the river fully. One morning, frustrated by the stagnant water, he kneeled at the river's edge and plunged his face beneath the surface. The icy, murky water offered barely any visibility, but he pressed on, determined to find the truth. Time and again he dipped his head, feeling his way around until he noticed a glint at the bottom. A large, heavy metal box appeared to be buried there, obstructing the water's flow. Taking a deep breath, Liam dove, reaching for the cold, slick metal, trying to free it, but it was stuck fast. Hours passed as he continued to resurface, then dive back down, straining to dislodge the box. His fingers ached and were caked with mud, but he refused to surrender. By noon, with one final burst of strength, he managed to pry the box loose from the riverbed. Liam panted, completely spent, as he hauled the box onto the riverbank. With nothing obstructing the water's path, the river began to flow freely again, washing away the stale muck and replacing it with a fresh, clear current. For the first time, he watched the river start to come back to life, and a tired but content smile crept across his face. But the box now demanded his attention. It was heavy and covered in rust, and he struggled several times to get it open. At last, the lid loosened, and inside he saw items wrapped in plastic bags. Gently, he moved the bags aside and found papers, sketches, and an old letter. The letter, though aged and yellowed, was still legible. He read it carefully. "This river and this land are mine," the letter opened. "I've loved this place my entire life, but it's been polluted endlessly. I tried to restore it, but I'm too old to manage it alone." The letter continued, "If someone finds this box and breathes life back into the river, they've earned the right to build a palace here." Liam's eyes widened as he read on. Tucked inside was a check, and the amount stunned him. $5 million. There were thorough architectural plans and sketches for a grand building with lush gardens next to the now clear river beside the check. He couldn't believe what he was looking at. All the sweat and all the hard work he'd put into cleaning up the river had led to something beyond his wildest dreams. His mom had always taught him to stand up for what mattered, to do the right thing. In that moment, Liam realized he hadn't just saved a river, he'd also secured his future. Still muddy, his hands aching from the effort, Liam looked up at the sky, his eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you, Mum," he murmured, feeling her spirit close, her strength guiding him to this point. With the promise of a new beginning before him, he was ready to claim the reward his courage and resilience had brought. As he clutched the letter in his shaking hands, something amazing started to happen. The river, once dull and lifeless, began to come alive, transformed right before his eyes. As each second passed, the water grew clearer. The current surged with newfound energy, and the sound of rushing water echoed through the forest, filling it with a lively, refreshing tune. The crowd who had doubted Liam all along stood frozen, their eyes wide and mouths open, struggling to comprehend how a mere kid had managed something they never believed possible. But even with the miracle happening right before them, their attitudes stayed the same. The people who had dismissed him still ignored him, seeing only a scruffy, dirty boy daring to wade into the polluted stream. There was no appreciation, no thanks, only looks of indifference, and for some, outright disgust. Liam had given up expecting anything from them. He had found his own value, and that was enough. His gaze turned to the contents of the box and the letter left by the millionaire. Through smudged tears on the page, Liam saw an address and a name, the lawyer who would help him bring the palace project to life. The blueprints were vivid and breathtaking, like a dream within reach. Silently, he vowed to make it a reality. With the check, the letter, and an unbreakable resolve, Liam headed for the city. The journey was tough, exhausted, hungry, and with a long road ahead, he pressed on. After what felt like hours, he finally reached the base of a tall building, its shiny plaque displaying the lawyer's name. Taking a deep breath, Liam stepped inside, feeling the weight of curious eyes on him as adults watched him cross the lobby. Covered in mud, barefoot, and with a sharp, lingering odor, he was quite a sight. When he reached the lawyer's office, the receptionist looked him over, her voice tinged with surprise and slight disdain. "Can I help you?" she asked, clearly skeptical. Liam, his voice weak but steady, replied, "I need to see the lawyer. It's important." She paused, taking him in from head to toe. Something in his gaze must have convinced her, because without another word, she rose and went into the lawyer's office, leaving the door just slightly open. Moments later, she returned and gave him a brief nod. "You can go in." Liam stepped inside, meeting the steady gaze of an older man with glasses and a serious look etched into his features. The attorney looked at him, clearly taken aback by the sight of a young boy in such a state. "What brings you here, kid?" he asked, rising from behind his desk. Without a word, Liam opened the box he had been carrying and set it on the desk. The lawyer frowned, leaning in to get a better look, curious about what the boy had brought. As his eyes scanned over the letter and the blue emblem inside, his expression shifted to one of complete surprise. He read quietly, absorbing every word, then glanced back at Liam with a mixture of astonishment and respect. "You found this?" he asked, his tone now softened. Liam nodded. "I cleaned up the river. I want to build the palace, just like it says in the letter." The lawyer paused, piecing together the significance of what was unfolding before him. He came to the realization that this child, who had gone unnoticed by everyone, was in fact the rightful heir to this land. This boy had battled not only the river's current, but also the apathy of the world, and he had prevailed. "All right, kid, I'll help you," the lawyer said at last, leaning forward and offering his hand. Liam looked at the outstretched hand and shook it firmly, feeling, perhaps for the first time, truly seen and appreciated for his hard work. The lawyer managed a faint smile. "Let's make it happen." Years passed, and Liam was no longer the small, forgotten boy he once was. By 17, he had grown into a young man, and his life transformed. Although the journey had been tough, he never let go of his dream. Now, a thriving paradise of nature and life surrounded the palace as it stood haughtily along the riverbank. A peaceful lake, a clear, flowing river, and a gentle waterfall now replaced the once polluted waterway. Around it, hotels, cabins, and trails welcomed people to the beautiful sanctuary Liam had poured his heart into. But achieving this dream had not come without its costs. During the development, the families who had long lived near the river, the same ones who once scorned and rejected Liam, had to leave their homes. The lawyer, always sharp and unyielding, insisted on it. "They never helped you, Liam. They're the ones who destroyed the river. They didn't deserve to stay." Liam felt an unsettling discomfort about the choice he had made. The memories of scornful glares, cutting remarks, and loud accusations flooded his mind. Yet he couldn't shake the awareness that these individuals had families, children, and lives that mattered deeply to them. Liam battled a storm of emotions, torn between his quest for justice and the persistent sorrow that lingered within him. The lawyer, however, was a skilled persuader, constantly reminding him of the pain he had suffered and the harsh treatment he had endured. In the end, Liam relented. He told himself that his actions were for a higher purpose, for the project, for the river, and for everything he had labored tirelessly to build. But with every walk past the vacant houses, their windows tightly boarded and doors securely locked, a bitter sense of regret seeped into his heart. Life went on. By the time he turned 17, Liam stood on the verge of achieving his greatest dream. The grand mansion, exactly as it had been laid out in the blueprints he'd unearthed from that old, rusted box, loomed majestically before him. Its white exterior sparkled in the sunlight, reflected beautifully in the crystal-clear waters of the river. The gardens that surrounded the estate bloomed vibrantly, filled with flowers in every conceivable hue, their sweet fragrances wafting through the air, bringing with it a sense of renewal and freedom. Every ounce of effort, every sacrifice he had made, had culminated in a place that felt like something out of a fantasy. The hotels and cabins that dotted the area attracted tourists from far and wide. Visitors flocked to bask in the stunning beauty of the lake, the meandering river, and the spectacular waterfall that cascaded down the cliffs. Meandering trails that wound through the adjacent woods provided views so breathtaking they seemed almost too good to be true. This place, transformed into a paradise, was beyond anything Liam had envisioned when he first set out to cleanse the polluted river. On the day of the grand opening, Liam ambled slowly along the pathways, taking in the results of years of dedicated hard work. Those who had once looked down on him now regarded him with admiration and respect. Many of them had found employment at the hotels or were tending to the gardens. Yet, a gnawing guilt clung to him when he remembered how he had forced them from their homes, stripping them of their meager possessions to fulfill his aspirations. Almost as if sensing his inner conflict, the lawyer approached him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Look at all of this, Liam," he said, gesturing broadly to the scene unfolding before them. "None of this would have been achievable without you. This is the result of your hard work and determination." Liam nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the waterfall, sparkling brightly under the warm sun. He had fashioned something truly beautiful, bringing to life the vision of the wealthy man who had entrusted him with the plans contained in that worn, weathered box. However, deep within him, he understood that life encompassed more than just wealth or material possessions. Somewhere along his journey, something vital had been lost, something that no amount of success or riches could ever replace. As he watched the river flow, clear and unencumbered, Liam allowed a bittersweet smile to creep across his face. He had rescued his home, transforming it into something far more exquisite than anyone could have anticipated. Life would never be without its flaws. There would always be the shadows of pain and loss. But at that precise moment, in the midst of the paradise he had painstakingly created, he dared to think that his mother would have been pleased with what he had accomplished, and this thought brought him a profound sense of peace. As the grand opening day of the project drew to a close, Liam found himself standing in the spotlight. Television cameras captured his youthful image, just 17 years old. Yet he was already hailed as the architect of a stunning transformation that had turned a dying river into a vibrant haven. His inspiring story of perseverance and unwavering determination spread quickly, resonating with many hearts. People marveled at the journey of the boy who had refused to give up against all odds. Yet despite the accolades and joy that surrounded him, Liam was acutely aware of an unresolved issue simmering within him, his deep-seated desire for revenge that had haunted him for years. On the day he turned 18, Liam made the bold decision to confront his past and finally close the darkest chapter of his life. Dressed in formal attire, he strode confidently into the building that had once belonged to his mother. The automatic doors slid open effortlessly, and with every step he took toward the reception desk, a flood of childhood memories washed over him. He requested to meet with the owner, the man who had once been his father, the same man who had cruelly tossed him into the river with the intent to end his life. The receptionist, sensing the calm, yet he was resolute determination radiating from the young man, made the call without a hint of hesitation. Moments later, the owner emerged into the lobby, his face showing the signs of years spent indulging in a fortune that was never truly his. His cold, detached eyes scanned Liam, failing to recognize the young man standing before him. "What do you want, kid?" the man asked, his tone impatient and dismissive. Liam locked eyes with the man before him, his gaze smoldering with the weight of years spent stifling anger and determination. He stepped forward with purpose, his voice calm but unwavering. "Don't you remember me? I'm the boy you tried to kill." The man's complexion turned ashen, his eyes widened in disbelief, and his mouth hung open, struggling to articulate a response. Fear enveloped him like a suffocating blanket, and the silence that followed felt so thick that it seemed to halt time itself. All the memories he thought he had buried deep beneath a dark, forgotten river were suddenly surfacing in the most shocking way. "This can't be happening," he whispered, taking an involuntary step back. He fought to regain his composure, the fear that had once been evident on his face contorting into a grimace of anger and defiance. He attempted to intimidate and threaten, just as he had always done to others. "You have no right to be here," he shouted, his voice echoing through the sterile office walls. "I'll get rid of you again, just like I should have done the first time." But before he could lay a finger on Liam, the office doors swung open violently, and several police officers surged in. They had been lying in wait for Liam's signal, poised to arrest the man who had committed such a horrific crime all those years ago. The officers quickly closed in on Liam's father, swiftly placing handcuffs around his wrists as he howled and struggled against them. "This is a mistake. You can't do this to me," he roared, his voice laced with indignation, but no one paid him any heed. The police officers dragged him out of the office, his desperate cries fading down the hallway, while Liam stood rooted in place, watching the man who had stolen his childhood. The man who had once attempted to take his life was now being led away in chains, utterly defeated. Finally, his father's fate had been sealed. As the rightful heir to the company, Liam found himself not only inheriting wealth, but also a long-awaited justice. With newfound authority in his hands, he made the choice to reshape the business into something beneficial, something that could foster good in the world. He had endured immense suffering and faced trials that felt like hell. But in the end, he emerged triumphant. His childhood friends, who had never forgotten him, welcomed him back to the place that had once been his home and was now filled with memories of his mother. They rushed forward, enveloping him in warm embraces, tears glistening in their eyes. His mother had lovingly prepared his favorite meals in the kitchen, and the comfortable couch where he would curl up next to her to listen to her stories flooded his senses as he entered the house. Everything was still there, yet now it felt achingly empty. As he struggled with the profound absence of his mother, Liam let the tears fall freely, salty drops streaming down his cheeks. It felt more intense than it had ever before, a crushing weight on his heart. In that poignant moment, he felt a warm hand gently resting on his shoulder. When he turned around, his childhood friend Emily was there, standing motionless. Without uttering a single word, she stepped closer and enveloped him in a comforting embrace, her warmth wrapping around him like a soft blanket, momentarily easing the emptiness he had felt so deeply. "Liam, I have to tell you, I've always loved you," Emily whispered softly through her own tears, her voice filled with emotion. Liam looked at her, taken aback by her heartfelt confession. The words hung in the air between them, charged with an undeniable tension. Without needing any further words, he leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was electric, overflowing with emotion and relief, infused with a sense of hope. It marked not just the end of a long chapter filled with suffering, but also the beginning of a new life, brimming with love. Fast forward several years, and Liam and Emily found themselves married, living in bliss by the river, surrounded by the serene beauty of nature and the bonds of love. Together, they welcomed 5 children into the world, and the idyllic paradise Liam had labored so hard to create became the vibrant heart of their close-knit family. Their children thrived, running joyfully through the winding trails, playing near the glistening lake, and listening intently to their father's inspiring tales of perseverance. Liam's legacy was forever imprinted in that cherished place, echoing through every nook and cranny of the paradise he had painstakingly reclaimed from the shadows of neglect. It was a narrative rich with struggle, justice, and ultimately love. And right there, alongside Emily and their beloved children, Liam discovered the happiness he had always dreamed of. The love that had been waiting for him patiently all along was encircling him, as well as the river that had brought him back to life. Hey everyone, I just want to take a moment to reflect on this story we've been discussing. While Liam's experiences are indeed fictional, the emotions, pain, and challenges he faced are all too real for many children around the globe. There are kids out there experiencing situations just like Liam, abandoned, neglected, or even manipulated as pawns in a game they never consented to play. It's heartbreaking, but it's a harsh reality. As parents, it's crucial to remember that our children are the most innocent and pure gifts from God. They look up to us with unwavering trust, and it is our responsibility to protect and cherish that trust. Many people lose themselves in the pursuit of wealth, success, or power, but no amount of money is worth sacrificing your child's love and respect. Liam's story serves as a powerful reminder of what can happen when we lose sight of what truly matters: family, love, and the connections that bind us together. I hope this story inspires you to reflect on your own relationships, particularly with your children. Show them love, patience, and kindness, because they are only young for a short while. They are not merely part of your life, they are your life. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. Did it shed light on something new for you? Perhaps you know someone who has endured a similar experience. Share your reflections in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this discussion and wish to explore more meaningful stories like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who might need this reminder today. Let's keep these important conversations flowing. Thank you for watching.